I'm honored to introduce our next set of speakers, Sarah Kaiser and Cassandra Granade. Sarah is a senior cloud developer advocate for Python at Microsoft. They hold a PhD in physics from the University of Waterloo, and they are also an accomplished author, mariner, got that one, and a master wielder of lasers. Their handsome German shepherd, Chewie, makes several cameos on their website. Cassandra is the owner and principal of Dual Space Solutions, LLC. She holds a PhD in physics from the University of Waterloo. And she is very good at quantum computing, so much so that she's an accomplished researcher and author in the quantum computing space, including a book about learning quantum computing with Python that is co-authored with Sarah Kaiser, which has been translated into at least 6 foreign languages. Please join me in welcoming both Sarah Kaiser and Cassandra Granade for their talk entitled A Bridge Over Not Troubled Waters, Collecting Marine Data from Your Couch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. That was great, actually. I did not think to credit Chewie, but you will see him quite a lot in this talk. And yeah, welcome. I'd like to welcome you aboard our boat, the Sea Knot. So we live in Seattle, and during the pandemic, we got really, we needed to get out somewhere. So we made perhaps the irrational decision to impulsively buy a boat. And not just any boat, a 1979 Tollycraft sedan. So this is a 27-foot long boat with one engine. It's pretty much like an Airstream that floats. So like let's start from there. And you can see the interior kind of looks like this. Chewie is posing at the banquette, but we've got a mini kitchen, we've got a head. There also sleeps 2 up in the V-berth, which again has been fully vetted by our safety officer. But let's just say we knew it was going to be a project boat, or perhaps a PyProject.toml boat. We're working on migrating towards the latter, basically. But yeah, it had been sitting on the hard for over 2 years, and while it ran, we kind of have continually discovered new problems. So this was one time. That tube controls all the cooling for the engine, which takes water from the lake or ocean through there, and it just exploded and started filling our bilge with seawater, and all we had was electrical tape. So surprisingly, you can hold that back with electrical tape. Or we found situations where this was the nicest of the bad wiring that we found, of just regular house light switches that had been put in. Some fishermen had owned the boat previously, and I think DIY'd a lot of things. So, you know, we were both physicists, and we like to do things right. We have done lots of research collaborations together, and we can get kind of dangerous with both hardware and software. But especially during the pandemic, and even now, we both have long COVID, so sometimes we can't actually get out to the boat for a while. And given the state of the boat, sometimes we're like, is it taking on water? Is it still floating? Is a potentially reasonable question that as we're sitting on the couch at night, I'm not actually entirely sure of. And really all we have to the instrumentation that exists on the boat is those 4 gauges, basically. And one that is broken that measures the battery voltage. And this is where most of the guts of the boat live in the back. There's these 2 lazarettes that you can open, but there's also not really a lot of room for a person to go down there and check things. I have managed to slink my body along the side, but let's just say I didn't move a lot after that. So all of these things are kind of ripe for installing IoT sorts of sensors to make the nerd and data nerds in us a little more calm. Because in addition to us, our dog is also very anxious. So this is why we have dubbed him the safety officer for the boat. And this was how he was feeling when we first got it. He didn't actually really like going out on the boat. He's much more comfortable now, but we were all not doing great. So we decided, given our skill set and what we really love to do, which is open source, we would use and build open source tools to make some bridges here, specifically for our data. So kind of the three main questions that drove our design process here was, what sort of data do we actually have to collect? Like, is boat sinking is not really a sensor option, but things like bilge temperature, if it gets super cold, is something freezing and that's gonna pop off a line somewhere. Also, is the cabin, one of the other main things that the boat was challenged with was there was a lot of mold on it, which is pretty common here in the Pacific Northwest. Things stay pretty humid, so you have to heat the cabin. But I don't know if the heater is still going or if it's tipped over because it's literally just a house space heater. So we needed to have all of this data. We needed a way to collect all of the information because there was so many different systems. It's not like there was just, you know, an off-the-shelf option we could really use. And then how do we actually get that data back to our house? So, and we had a makerspace in our house at our disposal, and possibly too much time. And all the money went to actually fixing the real holes in the boat. So the other constraint was, this was something we wanted to do kind of with on a budget. So where we landed was building our own chart plotter called Anode, which, fun fact, anodes on boats are basically they're sacrificial. You put them on the outside of the hull so that the salt water eats away at those and doesn't destroy your boat. So we assume that this will slowly degrade over time, and eventually we'll have to replace it. But for now, it was really fun to build. So it literally has a big touch screen on the front. It's powered by a Raspberry Pi, and we'll go through and talk about all the other fun parts about Anode, including I really like designing panels and making things nice, so all the buttons and everything are waterproof. I know it seems like a silly thing, but they glow. Everybody loves good glowy lights on things. Yes, so first part, how do we detect the conditions on board? So the go-to normal option that you would do on a boat is something called NMEA 2000. So it's a kind of trunk and sensor-based both hardware and software protocol that's very similar to the CAN bus on your car. So if you bring your car in and somebody puts one of those little meters in to read out the messages, it's almost literally the same thing, just with support for the things that your boat would have that your car doesn't. That's great, but because it's an official standard and requires certification of products, and BOAT stands for Bring On Another 1,000, the official NMEA components are very expensive. So we weren't about to just go and, you know, a lot of the things we want here do have commercial NMEA sensors, but for a temperature sensor to cost $500, that seemed really not smart to us. So, like, this is what, if you did things properly, what it would look like on your boat. So you have kind of one main power and communication bus, and you have all these little sensors and different readouts, displays, like wherever you would need them on the boat. So.
Welcome to the sea knot.
Oh, hang on. I want to hear it from the beginning.
You can keep going. Welcome to the sea knot. As you've just heard, we have a lot of sensors on board to help us keep track of the boat and make sure it's in good working order. So one of those, or several of those, are provided by the chart plotter that we have here. A few more by our little radio here. Handy little radio there for emergency communication. And there's, in the bilge, we have a compass and things like that. And by and large, those talk over the NMEA standard for marine electronics. Those talk in standard data packets that are all well-defined. You can look up in the spec if you download that. But the problem is, if I want to do something like measure a cabin temperature, I can go buy a several $100 cabin temperature sensor that talks over NMEA, run the cable, that's a rather expensive cable, back to our chart plotter and our homemade chart plotter, or I can go and buy 20...
That's okay, you do one of the influencer things, like put your hand to make it focus. That was the issue.
You can go and buy a $20 Zigbee device that measures temperature and humidity. But now we have a problem. How do we actually get that to show up in the same way as our chart plotter, our radio, the bilge sensor, and everything like that? And that's where our handy bridge that we've been working on comes into play. It's running Signal K, an open source project that has its own unified data model that can accept things over NMEA, that can accept things over Zigbee, can accept custom-made ESP32-based sensors, and so forth, and combine all of that into one data model. It doesn't matter where each device comes from, it matters. This is the environment inside cabin temperature. And once I have all of that, Signal K then can go publish that to MQTT. And that's when we start using Mosquito by Eclipse, which has as part of its core functionality relaying to another Mosquito instance, that one running on our Home Assistant the server back home, and then that can read all those MQTT values off. And now we have that same Signal K data model that's available here, that's picking up all of the different NMEA instruments, our little Zigbee temperature and humidity sensor, and things like that, shovel all over MQTT into Home Assistant, and we can pick that up in our dashboard there. And that's really convenient. We can put more of these Zigbee sensors around. They're $20 instead of $200, and then we have one down in the bilge to make sure it doesn't get too humid or it doesn't freeze down there. And this gives us a lot of visibility into what's happening on our boat.
Sweet. I promise you she wasn't getting seasick. Our lights just started slowly changing color as we were recording. So, yes. Anyway, so I'm going to kind of show you some diagrams and dig into what Cassandra was just telling you folks about. So our more affordable network diagram here for the sensors looks something like this. So for safety reasons, we do have to get a few NMEA things because having a radio that broadcasts your location to the, what are the ocean rescue people? Coast Guard, there you go. To the ocean rescue people where you are if you're sinking. So those sorts of safety things that are NMEA devices, we have to go with those. So we do have a trunk for that, but everything else that are kind of like these, because our boat has some needs, we can add at a much cheaper price point. Over Zigbee, we're using some actually over Bluetooth, and the ones in the future will probably be over ESP32 with the ESP home sort of open source projects. So one of the things, I'm going to highlight a couple open source projects here that have been really helpful in this build. One of them is Zigbee to MQTT. So that basically made it plug and play to take all of these Zigbee sensors and turn them into Signal K likes MQTT packets. So rather than having to write our own, we started writing our own connector, and then at one night when we got frustrated, it's like, did we check to see if there was something that did this already? And then we checked. And it's lovely. It was like 2 clicks, and it just works. So if you're doing any sort of smart home stuff and want to check out and using Zigbee, it's a great option. So we have that server Zigbee to MQTT running on Anode. So now we kind of have data coming from NMEA, from all these different sources. How do we actually get it together? And Cass already kind of gave us the answer, Signal K. So this is also an open source project. I kind of like to think of it as Home Assistant. If you're familiar with that, that's like the open source like smart home system, but it's for boats, like specifically designed for boats. I would have never thought that there was a huge ecosystem around this, but there actually is. So it takes all of these disparate sources, turns them all into what they call deltas, which is the unified data model. And so this is a screenshot of what kind of the dashboard looks like. I mean, it has an app store. So adding these plugins and stuff, again, like we're used to like having to write things for bare metal. So like we get to something like this and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, that'll work. So yeah, we get Signal K. So that's 2 of the 3 services that are running on Anode. So we have the Zigbee to MQTT, Signal K, and like it's not just a data kind of aggregation tool. You can make dashboards and things like Home Assistant. You can make all kinds of dashboards. So eventually, I will probably end up making some really nice ones for when we're driving so that I can actually see some of the data for the things that I'm worried about as we're driving that I wouldn't be able to see. Sometimes we send Cass or Chewy to go look in and be like, yeah, looks pretty good. We won't have to do that underway. So yeah, and because it's connected over to Mia, like I don't have the charts on Anode. The charts are served by Garmin because that's like what's pulled from all the satellite stuff. But it actually can composite things together because the radio knows about every boat has to broadcast its location. So it's kind of hard to see on here, but there's little red dot things over here. Those are all vessels in the channels here. They're advertising their location. So I can make sure not to hit them at the 8 knots that I'm going. It's a very slow boat. Cool, so now we have all our data in this, in Signal K. It knows about all of it. It's got all the metadata. How do we bridge that back to our house? So nominally, the marina has Wi-Fi, so that's kind of like probably the easiest level here. We ended up setting up a VPN. So like that was kind of our first test case, was just get a VPN between the boat and our house. We use Tailscale. I love it. Come talk to me later about Tailscale. But it was just kind of a good way. Now, basically, Anode is on the same network as our Home Assistant is at home. And the third service that's running on Anode is a Mosquito server, as Cass mentioned. So that's basically a server that we can set up one on each side, and that's how we're sending the information between the boat and our house. So I have this was my attempt at trying to document all of those things that we've talked about here. So you can see the sensors. They all come into Signal K at some point, although technically the Zigbee to MQTT stuff goes into Mosquito, and then Signal K looks there. Anyway, so those all go together, and it's the Mosquito instances on each side that are communicating with each other. And then on our house side, that just publishes, there's an integration to Home Assistant, and we don't have any of our own like database services because we just use Home Assistant and turn them into devices on Home Assistant. So bilge temperature is a part of our house. So yeah, the kind of final how everything comes together here. This is the dashboard. It feels kind of sad that like this is the final result, but actually it's really a lot of work went into this. But you can see here we have like the cabin temperature and humidity. I mentioned that space heater. I can see how much it's consuming because it's also really expensive electricity at the marina. So we've set up some logic to when the cabin is dry enough, we can turn off the heater and have that automatically go. We know what's happening in the bilge. You can see Tailscale and MQTT bridge things. And you see one other thing here that I will talk about in a second. We even, as the nerds we were, set up uptime pages for all of these services. So, because sometimes you can tell in Home Assistant if something's down. Sometimes it's not entirely obvious. So like this is our, if something isn't showing up and working, let's go talk. I feel so DevOpsy with this. I'm not a DevOps person. So with all of that, our safety officer has given us the sign off to get ready for this boating season. Now, he really loves riding. Like, I just have to show you these pictures. There's a little hatch on the front, which is above the V-berth bed, and he sits on the bed with his head out the hole at the top. He loves it. So the next kind of steps here that we're, I would say, pretty far along on this one, but Wi-Fi at the marina isn't entirely something we want to rely on. They're really flaky. It has a lot of outages, and we may also want to collect some of this data while we're underway, because it would have been really helpful to know with one of the earlier problems that the temperature of the engine block was exceeding what the gauge up at the helm could tell us. So being able to collect data while we're actually going and have that sent back home immediately would be really helpful. So Meshtastic is a mesh network communication protocol. So I actually have on me there's tons, like it's an open source protocol, all open source hardware. I happen to have like this is like one of the cheapest devices. It's almost like an AirTag, but you can communicate over quite long distances. Seattle and Vancouver actually are very well supported in mesh. I almost can make it home to Seattle from here, but there are some like distance limits and how many hops you can make on the mesh. But given we saw that like the whole Puget Sound area is just covered in these sorts of relays, we're like, oh hey, maybe we can use this to relay and bridge our data back home while we're underway. So that's actually the other side of Anode, is we have built in already one of the microcontrollers that handles using an antenna to do that mesh networking, and already most of the way connects all of the data back to, we've had it work a couple times now to home, but the kind of main thing that we've needed to build or to support this is basically, since we are still sending things over MQTT, we need to be able to send MQTT packets over the mesh tastic protocol. So that's the project, we called that project Troubled Waters, which was actually, once we got to that point, we're like, oh, maybe this might be interesting enough to talk about for a talk. So yeah, if you are ever in Seattle, drop me a line. We can go for a float. But you can keep up on our projects for Troubled Waters there. All the slides for the talk are at talks.xgrenade.com/PyCascades 2026, and we're both on Mastodon. So yeah, thanks everybody for letting me info dump about our current nerd projects. So, thanks.